I die. Tuesday. Sick from winter eating, I reminisce about Adorno, Benjamin, and Marcuse, but choose Hart, Schaeffner, and Marx. Wednesday. Blue Gillette razor, blue toothbrush, blue Levi's, blue pool, blue jacket. I wonder if Andrew Feza is blue. I changed my pants. They are not blue, and neither am I. Thursday. Today I intend to wear my gray suit. I couldn't find it. How do you lose a suit? It seems possible it's at the cleaners, forgotten in a locker at the pool, or covered by another coat in one of several closets. I lose, misplace, or forget something almost every day. The only consolation is that I take some pleasure in finding lost items. Instead of the gray suit, I wear my tweed jacket. My first sport coats were from the thrift store. I wore them often in college. I guess I looked like a bum, or like one of Lou Welch's contemporaries. Welch attended the same college I did about 30 years earlier. My father used to wear a jacket or suit for weddings and readings. I can't remember any of these events, but in the photos he always seems to be conscious of the occasion and to look especially Irish. A woman bought me my first new suit, a blue blazer, gray flannels, white shirt, and a pink silk Lanvin tie in 1984. I was 21 years old. We attended the launch party for her magazine at the Guggenheim Museum in New York. I sure felt like I was on top of the world. Now I wear a jacket, shirt, and tie almost every day. This started in 2006, when I was falling to pieces pretty visibly. Among other things, my supervisor suggested that I start dressing a little better. She pointed out that I looked a little too academic for our government offices and that our division director took some pride in his appearance. I sometimes wonder if the suits or the therapy helped me get it together. Friday. The sly gray suit, hiding between two starched shirts, dreams of snowy Manhattan. In the mail. I'm wearing my black corduroy coat and listening to Serge Gainsborough and Brigitte Bardot sing Bonnie et Clyde and thinking of Paris and Douglas Oliver. My brother Edmund's memoir, Can It, arrived on Friday. It's really touching and sounds so natural. I will read it several more times and dip into it whenever I miss him. I think I understand it as arising from the same impulse I have recently had, to come to grips with the past. Some of the memoir was about Doug and the prostate cancer that killed him in 2000. Doug married Alice after our father died. I came to love him even though I didn't spend much time with Doug. I remember meeting him in Katona and playing ball. He twisted his ankle and broke a shoe and told me that every visit with the Yakaliks involved this sort of mayhem. In 1991, at the peak of my materialist phase, we had a long chat about mind. 20 years later, I'm not as much of a materialist. I wish I could tell him. When Doug was sick, I used to get updates from Anselm. I tried to call Paris a few times and say goodbye or something. I never got through. A few years later, I noticed I'd written the wrong international codes in my address book. I guess I didn't check them at the time because I was too afraid. I still picture him at St. Pancras Station in London in 1994, busy with travel and lectures and writing, on his way back to Paris, so attentive and so considerate, as I babbled on about my Drosophila. How long do you want me to go on for? Okay, good.
5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. Whichever comes first. Remember, 5 minutes.
Chickens. I became an epidemiologist in 2000. Since then, I've seen a lot of photos of people kissing chickens. This has to do with the origins of various kinds of flu. But I realized chickens are all about love for me as well. Our first chickens lived with us in Albion. I used to love collecting the eggs. My mom made me breakfast every day in California. alternating between a banana shake with a raw egg in it, an omelet, and French toast. She used a lot of egg, and I remember being shocked by how milky Katie Schneeman made her French toast. Later, our chickens started sleeping in the trees instead of their coop, and they were gradually disappeared by secret predators. One of my first jobs was at the Café Beaujolais. That's where I learned omelets were even better with plenty of sour cream. Now I'm proud of my own omelets. I've been married for almost 25 years, and my wife still mentions how I won her heart by cooking her a roast chicken when we first met. Hyperbole, I guess, but for a Jew, maybe chickens really are loved. The Worm. This is for Anselm and Edmund. Dune is a terrific novel for an evolutionary ecologist and quantitative geneticist like me. It features heroic planetary ecologists and selective breeding experiments that produce young men with amazing abilities. What's not to like? But the best part are the giant worms that roam the planet Arrakis and served as the central beasts of Herbert's novel. I spent about 6 years looking through a willed binocular microscope at larval Drosophila for hours, almost every day. My worms were only 1/8 of an inch long, but under the excellent optics of our microscopes, they seemed larger. At times, I would have a vivid and disorienting hallucination that I had fallen through the scope into the field of yeast and agar, where my worms roamed, and their giant bodies and ravenous mouths would be all around me. It was an effort to pull away from the scope. Among other things, all this microscopy led to one of my favorite papers, How Maggots Move. Curiously, my collaborator on this project, an energetic undergraduate, did not follow up on our work. Instead, he embarked on a PhD concerning Caribbean lizards. I guess our interplanetary adventures on a Petri dish were not enough for him. Two more. Big Black Cock. I noticed the collected writings of Joe Brainerd by my son's bed. I was so happy to give him a copy when it came out this year because I recalled how comforting it was to read Brainerd's I Remember and how titillating I found his pornographic revisions of Nancy. He captured the joys and humiliations of growing up so vividly. My sons really dig him too. I went to New York in 1975 when I was 12 and visited an apartment that I somehow remember was Joe's. I was looking around and noticed a huge black candle in the shape of a cock. Appalled and fascinated, I picked it up. The cock broke in half, and there I was holding the shaft, with the balls still sitting on the table. It was unbelievably mortifying. I very carefully placed the cock back in its spot and wondered if anyone would ever notice. I don't remember meeting Joe, even though he was a close friend of my parents. The other vivid moment of humiliation I remember occurred a few years later, when I sent the wrong letters to 2 young women I'd met during my freshman year in college. The memory of receiving notes from them pointing out my mistakes still stings. Since then, I've been ashamed more times than I can count, and for much better reasons. But something about those 2 events stuck with me. Or maybe the wounds are too fresh for everything else. Okay, last one. Dad's music. NPR has just had a series, How, for Better or Worse, Has Your Parents' Record Collection Shaped Your Taste in Music? It had some touching interviews with kids and their parents about memories of music. So I was thinking about my father, Ted Berrigan's love of music, and our few conversations about it. In the late 1950s, Dad lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and worked at a record store. He had a bunch of 45s he would bring to parties in a box. A few years ago, Ron Padgett, his old friend from Tulsa, gave me the records. Ron's mom had them in the attic since Ron, Dick Gallup, Ted, and Joe Brainerd left Tulsa for New York to seek their fortunes. Ron gave them to me at a conference about the adventures and work of these 4 friends. The conference was pretty upsetting, but it was touching that Ron thought of me. I've not listened to them yet, but they are cataloged in an appendix of Ron's memoir, Ted, a personal memoir of Ted Berrigan. Someday I hope to hear them, and I have a scheme to put them on a webpage. It seems to be a sort of American songbook of the 40s and 50s. This year I was in Stockholm, which has a lot of vintage vinyl shops. I had a mission to find a copy of the Fugs eponymous album because it includes the track Doin' All Right that Ted wrote with Lee Crabtree and Richard Alderson. I already had one copy, but I wanted a second so both my sons could have one. Maybe they will have record players someday. Jim Carroll also based a song, People Who Died, on one of my dad's poems of the same name. You can find both versions online. I remember briefly wishing he could write a few popular songs and make a lot of money. In 1977, I played him Hey There Little Insect by Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. I don't think he was impressed, but it presaged my entomological career. I think Dad loved Dylan the most. Our penultimate visit was at my graduation from Reed College in Portland, Oregon in 1983. I lived with friends in a big old house. They had a good stereo and a lot of records. I remember Dad lying on the floor in front of the records, singing along to Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands and scoping out the collection. He used to say that poets had to lift their voices up in song. Thank you. You can turn it off.
Thank you very, very much. That was absolutely delightful. And my partner and co-curator is about